Here's why President Trump absolutely can reverse Joe Biden's pardons. Late Sunday night, President Trump took to Truth Social and dropped an absolute bombshell. He declared that the pardons that were signed by President Autopen, signed on behalf of President Biden or his interns or aides or Taco Jill or Hunter or whoever was actually in charge of the White House at the time, that those pardons are no longer in effect, according to his post. On Truth Social, the quote-unquote pardons that Sleepy Joe gave to the Unselect Committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by Autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but, more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the Unselect Committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on their behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of our country, Crooked Joe Biden. Now, this, my friends, is what you call an actual bombshell. People throw around the word bombshell all the time. This is the real deal. This means that people such as Liz Cheney, people such as Adam Schiff, and then he did mention that it's not just the people that were on the Select Committee on J6. It was also people, other people such as, maybe Anthony Fauci. Please let that be the case. That their pardons are no longer in effect. All of this started a couple of weeks ago when we reported that Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey had sent a letter to Pam Bondi, Attorney General, saying that he was calling into question and asking for an investigation into whether or not Joe Biden was even aware of the pardons, if he had the mental capacity to be able to make that call, and if he wasn't able to make that call, who made the call? And if it wasn't the President of the United States explicitly, then he, Andrew Bailey, believes that all of the pardons should be null and void. That's what launched all of this. So Andrew Bailey deserves credit. As do, unfortunately, I don't remember the names of the various people, the organizations that were involved, but there were actually a couple of groups that went through and they started examining the Autopen, or examining the signatures of Joe Biden for these pardons and for other documents, and came to the conclusion that the vast majority of quote-unquote signatures from the president were actually done by Autopen. For those who don't know what Autopen is, it's a device, okay? It's a metal device. You actually physically put a pen in it, you put the document in it, and you tell it where to sign it, and it duplicates the signature. It is a signature. Again, it's done by pen. It's not like printed on there or anything. It's not a stamp. It actually physically signs with a pen onto the document. And it has been used before. Barack Obama used Autopen quite often. So it's not like this is something new, but it's important that what President Trump had said. He said that it was done by Autopen, and that's important because that demonstrates a method through which others could make decisions on behalf of the President of the United States. They don't need Joe Biden to be aware of anything. They just have Autopen and they can sign whatever they want. That's why he said, more importantly, he mentioned the Autopen, but more importantly, he said Joe Biden, did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. Now, that's a declarative statement. He's not saying we're going to look into, we're going to investigate. I believe that President Trump and his team, they have information that leads them to believe that Joe Biden was completely incapacitated mentally and was unaware of the documents. I don't know if he's got whistleblowers. I don't know what they've got, but I would imagine that they have something, because the Autopen argument, everybody's been making the Autopen argument. I get it. I understand. It sucks. It's like, well, that it's done by Autopen. It's not the president's signature. Therefore, but again, we've talked about this in the past. Barack Obama has used it in the past. It was never brought into question. I mean, it was questioned, but it was never, didn't lead to a voiding of any documents. So there's no precedent there. And some would argue that that's not the bigger deal. The bigger deal is whether or not Joe Biden even knew or was aware or was even capable of being aware of these documents. You had Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, anecdotally during an interview, mentioning a story about how he was talking to Joe Biden one time about asking him questions about the executive order that he'd signed regarding banning of exporting liquid natural gas. And Joe Biden's like, I didn't sign an executive order about that. I signed an executive order about a study into liquid natural gas. And Johnson's like, no, Mr. President, you actually did sign a ban on the exports of liquid natural gas. Joe Biden was apparently surprised by this, but it was his executive order. So how could he be surprised by an executive order that he had allegedly signed just like a week before? There is a lot of evidence out there. Granted, most of it anecdotal, but I can assume, I would hope, that the president's attorneys, the White House attorneys, are on top of this. They have collected information. They are aware, which leads me to the other person who I believe should get a lot of credit, and that is Kara Castronova. She is a reporter for the Gateway Pundit. She's also the White House correspondent for Lindell TV. And as that correspondent, last week, she was in a White House press conference, and she asked White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt about Autopen. What is the administration doing? What does President Trump think? Yada, yada, yada. And Carolyn Leavitt, she's like, I actually don't know. I'm not familiar with that. She's like, I'll have to look into it. And it's conspicuous that the very next day is when President Trump started posting for the first time about Autopen. He started talking about it and mentioning it during interviews. Over the weekend, let me see if I've got this. Over the weekend, he posted a meme. I do have it. He posted this meme, no words to it, just this picture that we have on the screen. You got Trump 45 smiling. You got Trump 47 looking very serious. And then right in between, you have 46. Instead of a picture of Joe Biden, you have a picture of Joe Biden's signature being signed by Autopen. Funny stuff. So Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey deserves credit. The various organizations that looked into the Autopen scandal, they deserve credit. Kara Castronova over at Lindell TV deserves credit. Now the ball is in the president and his administration's court, and it seems as if they are running with it. Now, of course, there's going to be two arguments. The lawsuits, I'm sure, are already being filed that say, no, he can't do that. That's abuse of power. He can't undo Joe Biden's pardons. And technically speaking, they would be correct, except for the fact that I don't think these were Joe Biden's pardons. Okay, there's only two. Keep in mind, according to the Constitution, the president has very sweeping and absolute pardonabilities when it comes to federal crimes. I mean, there's very little said about it in the Constitution, and rightly so, and there's nothing said about reversing it. Okay? Like, it doesn't even give even a hint that a pardon could ever be reversed. There's only two criteria for a pardon to go into effect. Criteria number one is that it has to be delivered. In other words, you can't it's not like as soon as the president signs the pardon, that person's pardoned. The documents have to be physically delivered to all the appropriate parties. I'm assuming like the warden at the jail and the attorney general or district attorney and the convicted person's attorneys and probably the convicted person themselves. They all have to be served the documents that say that this person is pardoned. And then at that moment, it goes into effect. Criteria number two is that the president himself has to be the one that signs it. So now, again, I think that the Autopen play, I know everybody's leaning on that one. I don't think it's a strong case. Okay, I think that the real case here is Biden's mental acuity. I don't think he had it. I think it's very easy. They will be able to demonstrate very clearly that Biden was not capable of signing, was not capable of being aware of what was being signed on his behalf, and was not told. I believe that, and I'm assuming they will give evidence to this regard, that he wasn't even aware. He didn't know, that he couldn't be made aware. He wasn't retaining information anymore. His dementia was too far gone. The question isn't whether or not that's the case, it's when did that start? How far back does it go? How many documents can we make null and void? President Trump is focused on the J6 committee, and I understand that. that they are the pardons that really chap his khakis the most. I myself am hoping for Anthony Fauci's pardon to be reversed. That's the big one that I would love to see. And there are other people that got pardoned that now may be in jeopardy once again, may have to face justice once again. My only piece of advice to Anthony Fauci, to Adam Schiff, to Liz Cheney, and all of their unfriendly cohorts, my advice to you would be this: lawyer up. I appreciate you watching that clip. If you want to find all the other places where you can follow my work, the best place to do that is at jdrucker.com/find. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, and subscribe in other places like Apple Podcast or wherever, because it helps.